Alright, so hello everyone and welcome back to Strategy Sunday, Volume 14, this time looking at InGen, Robert Muldoon himself from the Jurassic Park 1 set. Um, First of all, big shout out to Kiet for helping me with the matchup spread. InGen is one of my favorite fighters, so I kind of knew what to go into, but of course I couldn't play every single game, so he helped a bit to kind of defy like what matchups I was uncertain about, and he answered some of the questions that I had. But yeah, big shout out, and we'll just jump right into it. The basic stats. Rob Muldoon and the InGen workers, also known as InGen, I'll just refer to them as Muldoon for now on stuff because yeah. We have Muldoon as a ranged fighter with 14 health, and the InGen workers as 1 health sidekicks are ranged as well. You have 3 of them, and you are move 3. So being double ranged just from the get-go is insanely strong. We've seen that from Yanenga and Black Widow, most notably, and technically Willow as well, but who cares about Willow? Um, and it just gives you so much board control. You always kind of like control the engagement because you can attack from far away, either with your hero or sidekick, which gives you a lot of board control. And I mean, in this case, even more so because you have 4 bodies on the board at best. With 3 1-health sidekicks, you can basically always attack everywhere since you are ranged. You can cover so many zones, you can cut off so many paths, it's really good and it helps you a lot in this deck. 14 health is not that bad for a fighter with multi-sidekicks. I mean, we've seen Dusa with 16, Shakespeare New has 13, and Electra, well, no one talks about Electra. Has also technically 16. But yeah, 14 is kind of like in the middle of the pack. It's not bad, but since you are double ranged in comparison to the other ones, it's definitely like really good. Move 3 is just like the extra bit of spice on top that wasn't needed. I mean, move 2 would have already been pretty good, but being move 3 is just overall better because it's better. And yeah, you have 11 unique cards in the deck, which should make it quite consistent, and it actually is. The only problem you might have at some point to draw your defenses, because, spoiler, you only have like 8 real good defenses out of your 30 cards, so you can struggle with that a bit, but since you have so many bodies on the board and your ability, which we'll talk about next, it shouldn't be that big of a problem. So, let's talk about the ability. And you have a rules card. Holy, this is probably the most I'll have to read at any point because holy Muldoon's rules card is long. Um, First, the ability itself. At the start of your turn, you may place a trap. Okay, sounds good. What is a trap? Whenever one of your traps is returned to the box, draw a card. Huh? Still doesn't answer what is a trap. And you have 8 traps. Okay, let's look at the rules card. Muldoon's traps. You may place a trap token in any unoccupied space in Muldoon's zone. If Muldoon's space is in more than one zone, you may pick a space in any of them. The target space cannot contain any fighters or other tokens, including other traps. When an opposing fighter enters a space with a trap, the trap goes off. The fighter must immediately stop moving and takes 1 damage. After the trap goes off, return it to the box. Muldoon and his allies may land on or move through traps freely without setting them off. Okay, let's condense that into 1 or 2 sentences of information. What does that actually mean? Um, you have 8 traps that just deny your opponent movement. They cannot move past them, they have to stop wherever the trap was. And whenever they do that, they take 1 damage and you draw 1 card, because it gets returned to the box. Um, First of all, you have 8 of them, so having up to 8 auto damage just from your ability by placing the traps is really strong. You can place them anywhere in your zone, if you're in more than one zone, anywhere in those couple of zones, which gives you a lot of board control. You can deny the opponent movement, which will make it way easier for you to abuse certain choke points and to keep your hero being Muldoon safe. Um, and since you always draw a card from tab, if it gets returned to the box, it can either help you to keep up pressure, because it's like your main way of drawing cards in the deck usually, Or if you're going later into the game, it will actually be a bad thing for you if we are talking fatigue, since you will deal 1 damage to an opposing fighter, which could also be a sidekick, not even a hero, and you would draw a card, which leads to 2 damage and fatigue. So that's actually a bad trade-off, but they are very versatile. You can shut off movement, you can keep up aggression. It just all depends on where and when you place them. And then we'll get to the cards. They should all be destroyed. I love Muldoon's card names. It is a Muldoon only attack. It's a 4 value with a boost value of 3. You have 3 copies of it, and it says during combat, +1 to this attack for each trap token adjacent to the opposing fighter. I just find the wording a bit weird that it just starts with +1 to this attack, not add +1 or something. I don't know. 4 value attacks are always nice to have. Average block value is 3, so you'll usually do like 1 combat damage here and there. But this can be a pretty consistent 5 if you place a trap at the start of your turn next to the opposing fighter, then you have 1 adjacent to them, so yeah, you can get a 5 value attack with this pretty reliably, which is good. However, more often this is more so used as a feint bait, just because most of your cards are vulnerable to feints. Of course, with having so much auto damage just built in your ability, your cards can't be as strong value-wise. So this is actually your highest printed value attack that you can get in the deck. So your opponent is usually just good with feinting basically everything. So this is quite a good punish for that, dealing 2 damage over the feint. So yeah, in some cases you can of course still get a higher value, but you shouldn't rely on it. If you have maybe 2 or 3 traps already laid out and you have some way to move the opposing fighter like next to them, then you can get this as a maybe 6 or a 7. That can happen, yeah, and it's really cool if you get the positioning out of it, but it's not something that you like should count on. It is it or it could be a win condition at some point if the opponent is at 2 health, for example. This would kill over a feint, and maybe if you have 2 traps next to them, it will also kill over their max value block if it's a 4 or something like that. So there are some lethal thresholds to take into consideration with this card, but yeah, mostly used as a feint bait for me. Um, and the 3 boost makes it a good toss for second shot, which is a boostable attack. So yeah, that's kind of good. And you have 3 copies of this, so you're not gonna like get full value out of these every time. So like throwing one as blank 4 or something like that on range just to throw your opponent off might be a good idea. And then we have Shooter, another Muldoon only attack. It's a 3 value attack with a boost value of 1. You have 2 copies, and it says during combat, if this is your first action this turn, this card's value is 5 instead. So 3 value attacks are like usually okay. Well, good that this isn't actually a 3 value attack if you play it, because it is a 5 if it's on first action. So since you're relying on playing this first action, it can be quite predictable. Your opponent will probably like feint or value block first action, just to prevent this, where you can like get some mind games with they shall all be destroyed in, but I mean both would technically usually be a feint, so they're good off value blocking anyways, but you can catch a feint, for example. And second action, this card is just a blank 3, which is not great, but it's an attack, so it could be a pass later. Um, just not that great. The only problem I have with this card is since you want to keep Muldoon away from danger as much as possible, it can be hard to actually get this effect, since it relies on the opponent to either be adjacent or in your zone, which means they are like pretty near to striking range of Muldoon himself. If they are ranged, well, they definitely can attack, and melee probably only 1 maneuver away, so it can be a bit risky at some point. Because your opponent is like so near to you that you might be better off like running away and hiding again. But again, you're move 3, so playing this first action isn't the end of the world. Um, and then like regrouping again with second one. It's a fine attack, it's just nothing special. You won't get it so often because your opponent will of course also play around it. If they can't get to you, why should they enter your zone? So yeah. Next up, probably my favorite card in the deck, Rending Shot. It's a 3 value attack this time an any, so your workers can use it. It has a boost value of 1. You have 4 copies of this. It says after combat, move the opposing fighter up to 3 spaces. So 3-value attacks are okay, and you might think, well, what's so special about this card that I like it so much? It looks kind of mid. Being able to move the opposing fighter up to 3 spaces is way stronger in this deck than others, because you rely so much on positioning. You have your traps to deal them auto damage. You can move the opposing fighter into a trap, for example, and then draw and keep up aggression. You can move them away to keep Muldoon safe. You can move them towards Muldoon, or like for a good destroyed, or you can move them like next to some traps to get even a better destroyed. This card is just so versatile. And since you have 4 copies of it, you're almost always guaranteed to have at least one in your hand for some positioning options that you can like consider and then take advantage of. There will always be a situation where this is useful. Like this is always a good card. No matter where or when you throw it, you will always find a good use case. Either make your opponent boost or get them into the trap or whatever. I love this card. It's so versatile. And yeah, it might not like instantly deal much damage, but since that's not really Muldoon's game plan to outright kill the opponent instantly, this just fits perfectly. But then, if you want to go for outright damage, I already mentioned it at the start when I talked about the boost value of They Shall All Be Destroyed. It's second shot. It's a 2-value attack any, so your workers can throw it as well. It has a boost value of 3, you have 2 copies, and it says during combat you may boost this attack. So, 2-value attacks usually like get play for their effect, and of course are really sustainable to Feint. This is kind of a discount version of Dusa's second shot. Where in her deck it is a 3 value, yet they can boost with a 4. In this deck it's a 2 value, which is still good. Your highest boost is a 3, so it can become a 5 value attack, which is like, yeah, that's technically your highest attack you have if we like don't count destroyed shenanigans where that gets above a 5, which it usually doesn't. But yeah, it's like a really good attack, and the good thing about this is your workers can throw it, so your workers can attack with 5s, at least twice per game, so your opponent will always have to think about it. They really want to feint worker attacks, because first of all, it can't be a destroyed, so they're not like as scared about being punished over their feint with a print 4. You still have ways to do that, but it's not as hard as with Muldoon. And I mean, you have so many options with workers now. You have rending shot to move the opposing fighter anywhere you want. You have second shot for big damage. Damn, workers are good. Yeah, I really like it. You probably should just keep one of these in the game for as long as possible, just to keep the threat of it, the threat of the workers throwing a 5-value attack, just to like make your opponent scared of it. But then if you have like the right timing, yeah, go for it. It's a really good card to throw. And then we'll get to the first of the few defense cards that we have. It's Leap Away. It's a 4-value versatile any, so the workers can block with it, or attack, which is important. It has a boost value of 2, and you have 3 copies. It says after combat, if you want the combat, choose one of the fighters in the combat and move them up to 4 spaces. So 4-value versatiles are great. Max value blocks, still 4-value attacks if you want. That's really, really good. This is, of course, one of your best defenses for Muldoon, should he ever be in danger. It's a 4-value block that will probably block most of the damage, and you can potentially also run away yourself or move the opposing fighter. The movement, even if it's conditional on winning, is still a great option to have for positioning. You could move the opposing fighter into a trap. You can move Muldoon away behind a trap to get him to safety. It's just a good option to have overall. And if the game progresses in a way that, well, you don't feel like Muldoon is in inevitable danger right now, and you maybe have like 1 or 2 of these in hand, don't hesitate to also throw these with one of your workers, because this is still a print 4, and since, like I said, your opponent kind of wants to feint worker attacks, this is a really good punish for that. And even if they don't feint, well, if you win the combat, it's basically just rending shot plus, because you won the combat, so you at least dealt 1 damage, and then you can still move the opposing fighter into a trap or something, and it's just one additional space of movement that you get. And you, if you for some reason need to, have the option to move your own worker instead. So don't hesitate to throw this. I wouldn't do it every single time because in some games against specific fighters, Muldoon might actually get 1 or 2 hits too many on himself, so you might need this as defense. But I mean, if you have the room to do it, go for it. It's a really good attack still in your deck. And then we'll get to Feint. We'll love to see our good old Feint. 2 value versatile any. Boost value of 1, 3 copies. Immediately. Cancel effects on your opponent's card. Yeah, you love to see Feints. Specifically in this one, because being able to use this with your workers just prevents the opponent from farming good effects on them. Maybe Luke farming still standing with recursion, or She-Hulk with sensational or omega level threat or whatever. It's like anything that they could just use your workers for to like get good effects of, you can just cancel still with this. Yeah, because the worker only has 1 health, it will usually die over that, but as we'll see later, you have enough workers. Holy. But it's nice to see a feint. It can also be like used as an offensive feint in this deck, just like many other ones. In this one, maybe more so because in some matchups, yeah, Muldoon won't be in as much danger, and if there aren't as many scary effects like recursion that you worry about from the opponent. Attacking with this first action might be pretty nice to deny them like any movement effects to get closer to Muldoon or to run away from a second attack, because with you having four move 3 ranged fighters on the board, you can put up a really good amount of pressure. Then adding to that the traps where the opponent can't freely move and you draw, um, you can actually pressure some characters down pretty easily. And getting like a free double attack opportunity by playing Feint first action might be a good idea in some cases. And then next common card that I think we've already talked about. Have we talked about Regroup? I think we have. If not, shame on me. I haven't included a deck with Regroup yet. Yeah, it's Regroup. It's a 1 value versatile any with a boost value of 1. You have 3 copies, and it says after combat, draw 1 card. If you won the combat, draw 2 cards instead. So, yeah, this is by far the strongest card in the game. Um, Jokes aside, Regroup in this deck is quite strong, since it is your only actual card draw on a actual combat card. Yeah, sure, you can draw if you push like an opponent into a trap with rending shot, but if there are no traps around, or like no traps in a circle of like 3 spaces around them, yeah, you can't actually draw. From your normal combat cards, you have a scheme where you can draw 2, but just by attacking or defending, you have no ways to draw outside of Regroup. Since you're not relying on big attacks to kill the opponent, but more so throwing like 300 small ones at them, chipping away at the defenses, maybe landing 1 or 2 undefended hits here and there, Regroup is kind of like the perfect bait attack for that. It wastes one of your opponent's defenses, you get to replace the card in your hand by the 1 draw, and it lets you keep up pressure, which is really good, because, like I said, you have 4 bodies that are ranged on the board, so you'll probably be able to attack every turn, and you have to have the card draw supply to do that, while still like keeping Muldoon himself safe. So Regroup is just a really good card overall, and in this case, it's still a versatile card, so you can block with it. In many decks, it might be like, yeah, you'll never get to do it. With Muldoon, yeah, there might be some cases where you actually have to defend Muldoon with Regroup, in which case, I mean, it's still 1 damage that you block, and you can draw a card to counter pressure. Although I might say, if we're talking about fatigue, it's better to not block at all, of course, because you're only blocking 1 damage with this, while you draw 1 card, which means you get 2 damage, leading to like a -1 trait, so you're better just not blocking at all. Um, but yeah, prepare yourself to eventually maybe defend Muldoon with a regroup once or twice in like 100 games. It can happen. And then we'll get to the only worker only card. The only worker only card, yep, in the deck. being tactical advance. It's a 3-value versatile with a boost value of 3, and you have 3 copies. It says, after combat, move each of your InGen workers up to 2 spaces. So yeah, 3-value versatiles are fine. It's average block value. You don't really complain. Um, this gives your workers a bit more survivability, just because, yeah, you don't have to spend your actual Muldoon block cards for them, and it can keep them alive to some degree. I mean, it's still only a 3-value block, but it can be nice to have. The movement is also like pretty good to react to whatever your opponent is throwing at you. Maybe they attacked one of your workers' first action with maybe a leap away from their own, and then since their worker got killed, they planned on moving their fighter like next to Muldoon with a 4 movement. But you can just say, haha, I can move my other two workers in your way to prevent that. That can be quite nice. Um, Other than that, this is prime boost material for second shot because it's a 3 boost. You have 3 copies of this. You won't need all 3 of them usually. But otherwise, it's still a good attack for the workers. It's still really versatile because you don't rely on hard hitting attacks. You just chip away at the defense attack every turn. This is quite good for that. You can also once you go in and attack, you can move your worker out of danger again to kind of kite with advantage and top away. So yeah, it's just a good card overall. Nothing special. Definitely one of the weaker ones in your deck, and just like I said, prime boost material for second shot. And then the only block only card in the deck with probably the coolest name in all of them matched. I've hunted most things that can hunt you. It's a Muldoon only 4-value block card with a boost value of 1, and you have 2 copies. It says, after combat, move each of your fighters up to 5 spaces. You may move them through spaces containing opposing fighters. Yeah, 4-value blocks are great. That's the max value block. Being able to move each of your fighters up to 5 spaces just gives you so much room to set up a nice new position. If you're playing this, of course, Muldoon got attacked himself, which you don't like, but this is kind of just like your safety option every time, because if someone reaches Muldoon at some point, which will happen, you won't get him to not get attacked the whole game, usually. You can just play this, block most of the damage, and run away to the other side of the board where you can set up your traps, workers, whatever you need again to keep Muldoon safe. It could also be a good setup for Shoot Her, just to be able to guarantee that you'll be able to first action attack with that as a 5 and then still get to a good position where you can hide behind your workers again. With your move 3 only. Well, only, it's still move 3. But yeah, this is of course your best block card in the deck, and it's just really good. It kind of does everything. It's a combo breaker. It guarantees that you only get attacked once in the turn, except if Feinted, in which case they didn't use a big attack over this, where you're probably still fine. And yeah, it's just a really, really good card. Also helps that you can move your workers as well to move them in a way or position in a new way again where you can maybe pin the opponent or whatever. You have so many options with this card, and I love it. And then, probably not the coolest, but the most important card in your whole deck. It's Call for Backup. It's a Muldoon-only scheme with a boost value of 3. You have 2 copies. It says, choose 2 different effects. Place up to 3 traps. Place all of your defeated InGen workers, if any, in Muldoon's zone, or draw 2 cards. So, having the option to bring back all 3 defeated workers can lead to you having 9 1-health sidekicks in one game, which is insane. You start with 3, they all get defeated, you get another 3, they all get defeated, you get another 3. That wastes at least 9 cards from your opponent. That's insane value game. This card alone wins you most melee matchups. If we're talking about Sinbad, Alice, Beowulf, who kind of have no other option than maneuver, attack, maneuver, attack. Yeah, this just shuts down their whole game plan because they'll have to draw 9 cards and waste 9 cards just on this alone. Plus you have your traps to deny them any shenanigans where they can move around that. Yeah, this card just instantly wins you the game. in many cases, and that's insane. It can be used as a pass as well, since you can just decide to bring back your workers and place 0 traps. Remember, it's up to, which means 0, 1, 2, or 3. Um, and that's also like the main way you use it in most matchups. Because if you place traps, just like I said, they are actually hurting you if we are talking fatigue-wise. And often Muldoon relies on fatigue damage to finish the opponent off, even if he like gets them out of defense. Um, there are still some use cases where you place all 3 traps or even draw. Maybe you don't have defense at all and you just really pressured because you would otherwise die next turn guaranteed. And you maybe just need to find that one feint. Yeah, you can draw the 2 and place 3 traps to maybe get some additional draw. The trap placement can, in some cases, also lead to you getting some big destroyed attacks. I've heard that Prospero on the Discord used that at some point, where he placed 1 trap at the start of his turn, then 3 additional ones with this, and then got an 8 value. They shall all be destroyed, which is like insane. That should never happen. But it can be a nice option. Well, yeah, just having 9 1 health sidekicks is insane. This card is insanely good, and combined with the next one, 5 passes with 9 bodies that your opponent wastes cards on, it makes Muldoon a menace in fatigue. And yeah, next one, remote detonation, is a scheme again, and it's an any, so your workers can use it, technically. Has a booster, you have 2, you have 3 copies, and it says, choose a trap in the same zone as any of your InGen workers. Deal 1 damage to each opposing fighter adjacent to that trap. Return that trap to the box. So this card is a really weird one, because you never really use it for the effect. Usually, it just never gets used, since you're almost always better with just attacking the opposing fighter with anything. Um, if there's a trap in your fighter's zone, that usually means, since you're ranged, that you could also just attack them, except if they're like next to a zone cutoff where the trap is in your zone and they are at the cutoff, but even then it's like, not great. Plus, it rarely brings like much value. Yeah, sure, it can deal 1 damage and then you draw 1 card, which is fine, I guess. But you have just way more better things to do. Technically, if you're up against maybe like Robin Hood and you can ping 2 or more outlaws with this to instantly kill them, that might be a good idea. But even then, it's like good, but not great. The main use of the card, however, is actually as a pass. And you might say, huh, how is this a trap? Is a pass? It returns a trap to the box, so you draw 1 card. Well, you can still play this even if there are no workers in the same zone as a trap, no workers at all on the board, or just no traps on the board. You can still play this card. Because it's an any, so even if the workers are dead, Muldoon can play it, and then, well, you choose a trap in the same zone as any of your workers. There are no workers, so you just can't choose a trap, and you can't return to a trap to the box, so the whole text is just a blank. You just play this card for nothing, and it is a pass. That sounds stupid, but it's how this card gets used most of the time. And yeah, like I said, this leads to you having 5 passes, 9 1 health sidekicks, insane value game. Melee fighters cry, and you cry against ranged fighters, basically. So yeah, the conclusion. Muldoon is a fighter that excels, but also relies on exactly one thing, your user positioning. I think I have not seen a single fighter up till now that is as complex and as reliant on positioning as Muldoon is. It's insane how much it depends on like if you win the game or not. Um, if you never really thought about your positioning unmatched, where to actually go, where's my best spot to always reach the opponent, Muldoon will probably not be the right fighter for you to start, since it's just really hard to think about every way you could protect him and make use of your workers and traps offensively, defensively, in any case given on the situation. Um, I think you're better off with starting like someone else who still like needs a bit of positioning issues, like maybe hiding a sidekick with Little Red or anything else. I think you're just way much better with picking that first, because if you just do one slip up with Muldoon and let the opponent in at the wrong point because you maybe didn't thought about one of their cards that could maybe go through your fighters and then get to you or whatever, that might just cost you a game. Um, just by the nature of his deck having 9 sidekicks and 5 passes, of course, he shuts down many of the traditional fighters like Alice Sinbad that just don't stand a chance. So whenever there's a competitive draft format, and you can ban out his counters being mostly ranged fighters like Yanenga or Medusa, if you can get them out of the way, Muldoon can become one of the biggest shutdowns in existence, like pretty similar to Wukong, where you pick him and the opponent cannot pick half of the roster again. It's insane. Um, However, if the opponent manages to still get to Muldoon himself a couple of times, he can crumble because you only have technically 8 normal defenses plus 3 regroups. Um, so you have to be really sure about what you're doing if you're playing Muldoon. Um, or he's just a really tricky fighter to play to his full potential, even for experienced players, because you have to know when to place your traps, where to place your traps, when do you want to be aggressive, how to actually manage Muldoon's defenses, and when you can allow him to like go up front and be in danger, and when you just want to hide him for like the whole game. Um, so yeah, he's just really tricky, but once you've mastered him, I think he's really, really fun to play. Um, Probably not so much to play against, but yeah. Um, Being able to read the game state in a way that you can deduce where to hide him, what to do and what not to do, when to be aggressive, will just defy a good Muldoon player or not, and he's definitely not a fighter that I would recommend to beginners. If you're more into the strategic, tactical analysis type of unmatched game where you don't like just think, oh, I'll just attack that guy, but you think exactly what is the right play. I think that's where you should think about maybe taking a look at Muldoon. Um, but yeah, for casual players, not a good option. And then we get to his card tier list. Of course, placements can change depending on the matchup um, and given situation, but I have decided that there are no D tier cards and no C tier cards in his deck, which is, I think, the first time we had that. I don't know. Um, in B tier, we have Tactical Advance, which is just, it's a decent card overall. Shooter, I find to be a bit unreliant, and your opponent can play around it too easily, but it's still a 5 value attack, so it will deal 1 damage over max value block and 1 damage over feint, so it's fine. Regroup, just good overall, getting rid of 1 defense from them and keeping up the pressure. Tactical, not tactical at once, we had that. Remote detonation, I mean, it's a pass later, but it's a pass with no effects other than being a pass. So for most of the game, it's just stuck in your hand, but once you get to fatigue, it's probably one of your best cards. That's why I put it in B tier. Then in A tier, they should all be destroyed. Just a good attack to throw as Muldoon. Good feint punish. Can be a 5 or a 6 depending on like how your positioning setup was. Feint, always great to see, especially if you only have 8 block cards. It's nice to see that you at least have Feint among them. Um, and second shot, being able to throw a 5 as a work is just great. But then my top 4 in S tier, I think no one will debate with that, at least for how Muldoon plays. Leap Away, just great card overall, max value block, and still good offensively. Um, Hunted most things. I'll not read the whole name. Probably your best block overall. Always a great save option. Then Rending Shot, so versatile. In whatever case you play it, you'll find a good use. And then, of course, Call for Backup. Like, it's insanely good. And then we'll get to the matchups. And you might see something here. First of all, tier list, as always, only based on personal experiences, so feel free to disagree in the comments. But I have decided in Muldoon's specific case to add a new tier in this, and that's the highly depends on matchup on map tier. Because holy Muldoon relies on map at some point, and positioning so much that I think those matchups are just way too swingy depending on what the map is. But we'll start with the don't try tier again. It's just fighters that can either reach him the whole time or just outvalue him. Which, like, Wukong outvalues him, Yen can always reach and has Stallion, Yen, Electra is Electra, Dusa is Dusa, Bullseye can always attack him, Strange outvalues, Bat outvalues, Tesla reaches him every time. Yeah, you'll not have a good time against those, you might just give up at some point. Then the slightly bad ones, ones that are not good for you, but in some cases you can still win. Luke, you have technically 8 auto damage against him, but of course he will use Misty to pop traps, and then you won't have a way to find damage through Trash Talk as much. Houdini can always teleport next to you and go in on Muldoon himself. Jill can outvalue you. Robin just has a sheer amount of aggression, being ranged in so many bodies to assert board control as well. That it's not great for you, but you can still do it. And the even ones are just, yeah, like I said, even. Most notably, Sherlock. You can play a pretty even game with Sherlock, which is interesting because you can basically attack him every turn, and Sherlock lacks defenses at some point. Um, She-Hulk is a funny one, where you really have to play around your workers and sensational or Omega level threat. But same again, you can just attack every turn and you're kind of fine. Um, Yeah, Sisters, Titania from the new set, and Widow. It's just kind of good. But then the highly depends on map tier. I'll go a bit deeper into what the strategy is. With Genie, you want as big of a map as possible because you want to fatigue him. You want him to be able to attack you like maybe max 2 times every 3 turns. Because Genie might be a move 3 ranged fighters, but his boost values suck. Except for 3 wishes, he doesn't have a single 3 boost in the deck. Um, kind of similar with Daredevil. You can just pick a large map. You'll always be able to aggress him at the start of the game because you have 4 move 3 ranged bodies. So you can get him out of defense and then just hope that he uses his devils on the workers and you feint them. So your workers are gone. You don't really play Callful Backup because at the point where your workers are gone and you've painted maybe one devil, you're up in deck count. You will probably win in fatigue, so you just run away. Daredevil, similar to Genie, has shit boost values. Only Devil and Man Without Fear being 3 boosts, so he will not be able to reach you at some point anymore. At which point you just win. Bigfoot also you want just a large map, chip away at his defenses, then run. Moon Knight same. With Moon Knight's case, I think it's one of the most important things is to not place traps because you can just pop them as Khonshu and don't take damage, and then you draw a card. You want to fatigue him, so you just run. And with Rex, of course, you also want a big map because, yeah, it's Rex. At some point, she will otherwise get to you. Then the favorite ones are ones that are, yeah, they can still do it. They have a chance, but usually it's like pretty Muldoon favored. Sattler, fatigue. Ghost Rider, just again, kind of fatigue, but you can also aggress him pretty easily to kind of punish his low Hellfire if he has at some point. Oh, and one thing I totally forgot to mention. Um, if one of your workers or Muldoon himself is standing on a trap and someone has the ability to move through your fighters, they can move through the space with a trap if an opposing fighter is standing on it because the trap would lead them to stop, but they can't stop on a space where an opposing fighter is, so they will still be able to move through. However, the trap will be still popped, so they take 1 damage and you draw a card, but they won't stop their movement, which, especially in the Ghost Rider case, is a pretty important one. If you keep that in mind, it's still like pretty good for you. Just be 3 away and you're fine. Then Bruce, I mean, he has 1-inch punch to deal with your workers, but overall you can still fatigue him. Panther, if you manage to kill Shuri first, like pretty early, yeah, it's fine for you. He boosts a lot, and then you're just good. Raptors, if you manage to position well, they will like almost never be able to gang up on you as much. Annie just relies on Charlie being alive. If you can kill him early, she has basically no way to get to you except for the two captain's orders. Um, and then the almost free win ones are, yeah, melee characters. Basically just straight up melee characters that are like straightforward, don't have many tricks up their sleeves, and yeah, they just die. Fun fact, when I talked about matchups with Kiet, he wanted to uh, he pointed one thing out, and I wanted to mention it: the Squirrel Girl matchup. Okay, yeah, Squirrel Girl, one of the worst fighters in the game. She is even with Muldoon. If we play on Baskerville or Solomon's, on those two maps, she's even with him. He specifically said that, and I wanted to mention it. Squirrel Girl enjoyers, that's for you. Um, but yeah, rest ones, like you see, he shuts down so many characters in an instant. That's like, oof. If you can get a good Muldoon pick in draft, it hurts. And then for the maps, Muldoon, of course, is a highly map-dependent fighter in many matchups due to his dependence on positioning. You need choke points, you need ways to hide Muldoon, you need good zone coverage to make use of his traps. And you're a ranged fighter, so hard cutoffs are pretty bad for you because you'll have to be adjacent to the opposing fighter. So, in many matchups, you want a large map with good zoning to use your ability advantage to the fullest, make the opponent boost, get into fatigue, play a good value game, hide Muldoon, and that's good. Your best three maps for that, for me, are Sherwood Forest, with a move 3 range center where you can basically always reach the opponent, or just like wall up in one of the corners on the top right or the bottom left. Then Memorial, just probably one of the best ranged maps overall. And again, good ways to just wall up. And then Sarpedon, you have the bridges where you can place traps to ultimately shut down opponent's movement. Like, holy, those are choke points where you can always keep them there. They will basically never be able to reach. And yeah, honorable mention, since there are 3 bans in competitive play now, I decided to kind of get an honorable mention as a 4th pick over here if the opponent should ban exactly these 3 maps. For me, would be Bronze. Bronze is still a pretty decent ranged map. And yeah. Then, thanks for watching. Feel free to write feedback, questions, comments, um, everything you want down there. Please tell me which character you want me to cover next. Planned are, just like I said last time, the Wayward Sisters, and after that I'll take a look at Titania, as you wished. And I'll also add like a small list here every time, which fighters are still like up for debate next time. I've seen requests for Golden Bat. I've seen a request for Genie. With the Genie one, I'll have to wait until I have like a full 2 week of full time because holy Genie is complicated and like testing every matchup there will take a lot of time. And then Panther, yeah, I'll have to at some point, I guess. But yeah, that should be it for now. Until next time.